Two. The recording is in progress. I am Grace Odell. I'm the executive director of NOFA Vermont. I use she and her pronouns. I know most of the attendees on this call, but thank you for joining us. We are expecting some more folks to be joining across the lunch hour. So we appreciate you taking the time to show up. And we will be recording this podcast. We will be recording this so that we can share it with folks who couldn't make it today. And if you are uncomfortable with that, you can message us, but you are not being recorded on video, just so you know. So we just have your name as an attendee. And the goal of this presentation is to transparently share sort of what's been going on at NOFA, particularly around our flood response and around the Farmer Emergency Fund. We've had a really amazing community support for that fund, and we've been doing a lot of work both in the immediate short term around the flood response, and then longer term want to share our thinking with you about what we're going to do with the remainder of the funds, and then looking towards a rebuilding and resilience down the road. So that is the intention of this call. My plan is to talk for about 20 to 30 minutes and just share some information with you, and then we'll be open to taking questions and answers, and no question is off the table. Feel free to raise whatever you are curious to hear about. I'm joined today by a number of my other NOFA colleagues who can also help field questions if there's something that's in their wheelhouse. So feel free to just get in here with any questions you may have for NOFA. And if you have a question come up during the presentation, this is a presenter style Zoom. So if you put it in the chat or the Q&A box, I think that one of my colleagues, Mark or Aaron or Maddie, can just flag it for me, because I can't actually see that on my screen as it is set up right now. Cool. All right. So again, feel free to interject a question if you have one as they come up, and we'll also have time. So again, my name is Grace Odell. I'm the executive director of the Northeast Organic Farming Association of Vermont. I use she and her pronouns. I'm glad to see you all today. And we're going to be going into both the flood of this season, our response to it, and ongoing work around that. So just a quick reminder that who we are a member-driven, farmer-led, and majority farmer and farm worker board governed organization that was started over 50 years ago. We have a mission to build a food and agricultural system in Vermont that is economically viable, ecologically sound, and socially just. And I do have a link here that Aaron or Maddie or Mark, could you please put in the chat for the rest of the participants? This is a link to a little zine that our marketing director recently made that sort of explains the wide variety of work that we do and how we see change happening and how we engage the strategies to make change. So if you want to look at that PDF, we will drop the link for you. So this is getting at why we do the work that we do. We believe that when we get food and farming right, we get so much more right as well. We get local food security. We have a more ecologically healthy ecosystem. We build soil health. We have active working landscape, which supports rural communities. We can use food and ag as a lever to make the sort of holistic change that we want to see in the world. And this summer, we experienced some really intense stresses to our ag system here in Vermont. We had a large flood over July 10th and 11th, which consisted of really record-breaking rains that fell across the entire state. As you can see, these rains brought the Winooski and Lamoille rivers up over water levels that we saw during Hurricane Irene. We had heavy rainfall and high water levels, which washed out access roads. It ruined stored crops and killed livestock across the state. So it was a real intense emergency moment. Oops, there's PDF. That's why I can't see my chat. And it was a very quick and unexpected flood. So one of the things that's noteworthy and sort of for planning purposes around future climate emergencies, this rainfall was not something that we saw coming. It was not something people were really prepared for until really the night before the rain. And it wasn't a part of some major storm system that folks were watching for a long time. And this is what it looked like on a lot of the farms we serve. These are just a few pictures. you can see, entire fields completely underwater, infrastructure flooded, and then, entire fields submerged, and then a lot of sediment left behind, laneways destroyed. So it's really profoundly impactful, both acutely and then in the long term. After the flood, after that acute day, the heavy rainfall did not stop with that storm. We continued to see one of the wettest summers in memory, and indeed records were broken. And these prolonged heavy rains not only affected the farm season in that moment, but it affected the ability to repair, to replant. Cultivation became very difficult on soggy fields. We had a lot of sediment deposited from the rivers moving across the landscape. We had a terrible feed crop and hay crop this year. So there was this continued, there was a lot of mildew and persistent pressure on the crop. And at one point on one of our statewide planning calls, Vern Grubinger was estimating about 50% yields across the state. And I don't know where we landed at the close of the season. We're not done yet, but really, really profoundly affected the entire season. And we'll return to this, but to underscore the point, the flooding happened at a moment in the season that was particularly painful in early July, before most of the harvest had come in, but late enough in the season that planting another crop was now possible. Many farms already very extended on debt, and just at sort of an impossible moment. The initial estimates that the Agency of Agriculture was making was about $16 million in initial total damages and loss from Vermont farms. And I believe that number continues to go up. So in terms of impact, we quickly put together a survey just to understand what was happening that first week. And we got about 120 responses. And we heard that about 25% on average of the farm had been flooded and lost crop. Many of our farms did experience a total loss of crops. And again, just underscoring this sort of came at the worst possible time of the season. The Agency of Agriculture also did a survey later in the summer, and many farmers, we were seeing similar ranges, about 28% of annual income lost, and huge losses coming from lack of hay, as well as flooded field crops. And 70% of respondents had no crop or livestock insurance. This is really important, because what we hear is those are the programs that there's a sense that there should be some kind of emergency support insurance program. And most of our farmers in Vermont did not even have that insurance in place. NOFA began to have a response really quickly. We had a meeting the next day. We quickly put together the survey. We started making one-to-one calls to as many of our farmers as we could. And what we began hearing was, I need help right now. I cannot wait for emergency funding from the state or from the federal government, which may or may not come. We are struggling now. We had loss of markets. Farmers were not allowed to sell any food that had been touched by the floodwaters. Farmers needed to get their soils tested to see. There was really considerable immediate concerns about maintaining cash flow and making sure that employees were paid, a need to wait on test results, and an extremely unclear process around what government agencies should they contact for support. Did they need to wait to have that agency come out? So there was just a lot of questions raised and a clear immediate need. So we quickly activated our Farmer Emergency Fund, which is a fund that has operated for over 25 years, and it's supported farmers through many forms of disaster. And generally, we have a small number of applications come in. This is like a barn fire, or someone has some family emergency. And what we're seeing is there's increasingly a need for climate emergency. We had a couple years ago a really intense drought season when we had many more applications for the fund because of that drought. This year, obviously, we had many, many more. And the way that the applications are reviewed is, again, through this lens of participatory process. We have a review committee that's comprised of farmers, farm workers, and staff. And those people review the application quickly and make a decision. The eligibility for the funds, which we adjusted to be up to $5,000 in the initial grant round, to be a little bit more than the typical $2,500 that we've given, We bumped it up to $5,000 once we were hearing from folks who had lost tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. We had eligibility that was you had to either be a VOF certified organic farm or a NOFA-Vermont member. And what we did in response to be really inclusive and to help as many farms stay in business as possible was we did away with the requirement that farms had to be members for the year before and allowed people to become members immediately. We also lowered our membership level to $1. So any farm could join. Accessibility and inclusion are really core organizational values. And we really wanted to support as many farms as we could, and then be able to just essentially advocate on their behalf. That's the power of having them as members. As we build power together, we have a growing membership of small and Vermont scale farms that want to do right by the land and keep their people fed here. And we need to be moving collectively to advocate for those farms' needs. And to sort of go into a little bit more about, well, why didn't federal relief kick in? There's a lot to be said about this. Luckily, our policy director has joined if there are more detailed questions that you want to go into. But essentially, a lot of farmers, as you heard from the agency's own estimation, 70% of farmers did not have insurance. But also, crop insurance is set up to serve larger, less diversified operations. The paperwork burden is very high. The payments are too low. In one example that's quite salient, we supported a farm recently who their strawberry crop is about half of their income, and they generally make between $15,000 a year. They lost about 12 and a half of that $1,000 of income because those fields were flooded before they could pick more. They spent a couple of weeks not being able to clean up their operation, waiting for someone to come and evaluate. They were enrolled in a crop insurance program that was supposed to work for diversified farms. And so they were already uniquely well-positioned there. It took many, many hours of their time and technical service provider time to apply for these funds. And they received ultimately a payout of $380. So that's the scale of the problem. The reason for this is in part because policies are typically based on individual crops. So that's like you have an acre of soy. That's a very simple thing to measure. And that's how all of the federal programs are sort of set up to support 1 acre per one crop kind of thing. Whereas that's not the way most of the farms that we support here in Vermont are set up. And this compensation is really what pushes people to get bigger and less diversified. And further, federal agencies are understaffed, and so they simply didn't have enough time to respond. And also, when emergency funding ultimately becomes available, it does so way, way, way at the end of the season that works for the political cycle, not for the farming cycle. Finally, there's this lack of coverage for farm employees. So we saw a lot of people laying off employees. There was essentially no answer around H-2A workers, what was going to happen to them. Many H-2A workers were sent back home and didn't have any support around finishing out the season or getting paid. So these implications are really vast. So the good news that is really wonderful, and is why we wanted to celebrate and bring you on here, is that we have raised over $1.7 million for the Farmer Emergency Fund. You have raised over $1.7 million. We have close to 3,000 unique donors, many, many people who spontaneously organized fundraisers or businesses who just decided to allocate the money or a percentage of the money that they made that week to the emergency fund. It's just been incredible community support, and it is so needed. I mean, again, gesturing back to that 16 million as the initial estimate, the scale of need is really vast, and the community has really shown up. So for comparison, after Irene, we gave out over, but just over $200,000. Between $200,000 and $250,000, so that we are able to give out over $1.7 million that we've brought in so far is truly amazing. We have awarded emergency grants and that have been approved for 179 farms thus far. And another really important element of this is the average turnaround time from the application to the check being in the mail is 8 days. So that's a very different kind of process that we're able to make possible here. And that includes multiple people's eyeballs on the application. It generally includes phone conversations, and we're able to turn it around. We also have a part-time bookkeeper, and I just want to shout out to our amazing part-time bookkeeper who's been cutting a lot of checks. But this is really a testament to that sense of community and to this feeling of we are the ones who are going to keep us safe. We're the ones who are going to shift resource, and we're going to do it quickly. So this is possible only through a lot of partnerships, individual donors, large grants. Thank you. Many of you who are here today are some of those people, and we are just deeply, deeply grateful. So just doing the math, we have money still in the emergency fund because we've been giving $5,000 grants. So we have been working with our executive committee, which again is majority farmer, and that review committee to think about what's next for the farmer emergency fund. We're still seeing applications come in. We did not have a cutoff, but they're coming in at a slower rate than they were before. We wanted to really hold it open through November because we knew that feed, and when people are assessing how much hay they will need to buy for the season, that was going to happen later, that they would have that clarity. And some emergency support has become available through the BGAP program and through VCF, and our farmer services team has been assisting farmers also with accessing those funds, so farmers are able to stack up a few things and get towards this huge loss that they experienced. But we still have considerable money in the fund. That number changes daily, but it's around $700,000-ish. And we're opening a second round starting now to get funds out fully. We want to give out as much as we can by the end of the year. And again, this was something we had said we hope to do if we had money left. Most farms only receive $5,000. Many had considerably more. Some people didn't. And so we will adjust. If people don't need more, we won't give out more. But if people do need more, we will make it really simple to just indicate, I still have not been made even come back from that loss. And I really do need more support to make it through. We have a lot of farms right now we're working with who are considering moving into the next season, whether they can do that and what their plan will be around that. And so we want to make more funds available if we can. We do plan to retain a small pool, probably around $100,000, to have something in the bank when the next emergency comes up, because one of the things we're really focusing on, both at NOFA and as a state, just this morning I was on the Vermont state planning call around sort of resilience. What are we doing holistically to be well positioned when the next emergency that we don't necessarily anticipate happens? Because more bumpiness and more disruption is going to be the norm, and we need to be ready for that. We provided additional support beyond the emergency fund just this season as well. We increased farm share support for participants who lost their CSA. So we helped rematch consumers whose CSA was lost because of the flood, and we didn't want to have that cost come back to the farmer. We also were able to share funds to farmers markets to assess their needs in the aftermath. Many of them had infrastructure losses. Many of them were giving out a lot more food access support. Many of them just needed help. And so we were able to grant funding to those markets to help them continue. We partnered with Vermont Law School to provide technical assistance in accessing federal funds. And we provide significant advocacy around emergency relief, and we continue to do so, in addition to providing the one-on-one business planning and technical assistance just in navigating what am I going to do the rest of this season. So we've really pivoted operations to be able to be as helpful as possible. And we've gotten some really lovely feedback from our farmers and our community members that were feeling supported by us. So that feels important. And we are beginning to look and think about what does rebuild and resilience look like, because one of the things that we know is it's easy to, it's not easy, but we can muster a lot of energy in the face of a crisis, but it's really hard to think long-term about how do we rebuild in a smart way? How do we plan to be more resilient the next time this happens rather than reactive again. So we are working hard. I don't know if many people on this call saw the news that looks like we're going to not have a farm bill this year, which is what we suspected, but that work will continue next year to getting a new farm bill. But we have a farm bill platform that we are working hard to advance. And it looks like Erin may be grabbing that link and can put it in the chat. We're building power and raising our voice around that platform. We also have a pool of funding called resilience grants. And resilience grants are all about preventative, planful projects that are aimed to move farms to help give them funding in their thinking about their social, climate, or economic farm resilience. We have been giving out over $150,000 a year. We've committed to doing it 3 more years at least. And we're really grateful to our generous partners who have helped fund that so that we can continue to do it. And we've had some really amazing success stories. We had one particularly salient success story that was a farmer who wrote us after the flood that they had gotten a resilience grant the year prior to put in a swale and berm system around their fields because they had had issues with water historically. And they did that using a resilience grant, which is just a couple $1,000s to dig swales and move water. And they did not experience flooding in their fields. The water came and actually was channeled in different ways. So that's the kind of project we want to help make these funds available. They're very flexible. And we see that as a core strategy. And we want to add more money to those and have people have the support that they need. Most farmers know what they need to do or have some project ideas in mind. They just need funding to do it. I also just want to raise up that the state's food security plan, which was a task force called together by the Farm to Plate network that's been tasked with creating a food security plan, and they've been working for several years. That plan is about to be published, and I want this community in particular to know that one of the core strategies in that plan is direct payments to farmers as a strategy of how we get at durable food security in the state. There's also a task force working on climate resiliency for this state that also is indicating direct payments to farmers. And we plan to do a planning work and head up a coalition to really raise noise about this strategy that's come up in these separate spaces that's saying, hey, if we actually want to have food security, we need to compensate folks in continuing to produce food here. So we're going to be looking at the models of these kinds of programs like they do in Europe, where there are these direct payment structures. It's really critical. I don't have the answers about how it will work yet, but if you want to help us do a planning process or get involved in that work, please do let us know, because we see that as very critical. The economic reality is such that if we could make it so that farms weren't so on the precipice when these emergencies hit, they would be so much more able to weather these storms and come out okay. And a really good way to do that is to support them with more money. And finally, we're continuing to increase our advocacy to access study funding, and the state this past year has supported NOFA's programs in food access work that both support farmers and support limited income Vermonters in accessing food that is organic and local and benefits small farmers, and we're going to continue working there. And these programs are all really looking at how do we get this triple bottom line of social, environmental, and economic place where farms can remain viable, can benefit our whole social fiber, and can keep us, can move us towards a more climate resilient and ecologically sound way of tending our land. Just really pointing out, as we've touched on before, that in this phase of rapid and as yet, unfortunately, unchecked climate change, we do anticipate that more summers like this will happen. We don't know what all of that's going to look like, but we know that bumpiness and a lot of crises are likely to continue happening. We need to be more planful, setting ourselves up and building resilience that supports not only our farmers, all of our food system, and ultimately a global ecosystem. And if we can get this right, resilience and planful work in Vermont, it could serve to be a standard that helps move the whole nation forward, much like how organic agriculture did start in Vermont, with Senator Leahy and Enid Wanacott helping to craft how that national organic program should govern how we take care of the land in the name of organic agriculture. We saw that grow across the whole nation. And we know that we need to center farmers and their voices in overcoming and facing these incredible challenges, because these people are the ones keeping us fed while also tending the land and really paying attention to how to adapt to resilience. And so looking forward, we are really hoping to make resilience work, something we do proactively and not just responsively. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to come out and hear this update, and also for all of your work, for showing up, whether you're a farmer and you made it through this season and continued to feed people. Thank you. If you're a funder and you shifted resource into the emergency fund or the resilience grants or our food access work so that we could help people weather this incredibly hard season, thank you. If you're just a person who shared some of the information on social media or, amplified the call, that is so important too. So we all have a role to play in this work, and we're deeply grateful for the sense of community that came together around making it through and thinking long term. So thank you. I'm going to stop the share of my screen. I hope you got those pieces of those PDFs and the links. And now I do want to open it up and see if folks have any questions for the group. Our development director, Erin Buckwalter's on, Maddie Kempner, our policy director's on, Mark Killian, general NOFA office team member and support wonder is on. Feel free to ask us any of your questions. I see something coming in. Can you post the PDFs and links again for those of us who are too late? Absolutely. Yes, we will do that. Other questions? Is there anything that you were hoping we would talk about? Oh, thank you. We're seeing no question, but wanted to thank you for all of your work for our farmers in the state of Vermont. Thank you. Thank you for your support. It would not be possible without all of you, honestly. We're just the people who get lucky enough to do this work with all of you. Andrea, you asked, we mentioned that we have approved 179 farms are given to overall farms. How many overall might be eligible? I believe in the 200s applied or filled out the Agency of Agriculture survey expressing need, and they all might be eligible if they apply for the grants. Again, there is a review process through our farmer review committee, but so far all of the projects who have raised their hand said that they have a need have been approved. And there is some assessment, and we see photographs, but we're also trying to keep it not such a high barrier to apply, because part of the issue with the other funding sources is they're incredibly administratively taxing, and they may or may not generate real support. I see. Can we talk about the Farm Bill and what improvements you think might make it possible with this round? Yes. Maddie, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, I would be more than happy to talk about that. We have some specific things that were already in our Farm Bill platform prior to the flooding that are really targeting better support for organic, smaller scale, diversified farmers. In addition to that platform, which you can see on our website, we are also circulating a sign-on letter that is calling on members of Congress, specifically who serve on the House and Senate Agriculture Committees in the Northeast, to make specific improvements to crop insurance and disaster relief programs for farmers in the Farm Bill. It's a little bit challenging to talk about improvements to crop insurance and disaster relief without getting very into the weeds quickly, but I will just say overall, making sure that our crop insurance programs and disaster relief programs serve the kinds of farms who really need them. That includes actually changing, the business structures that are eligible to participate in USDA programs, It means providing specific support for farm workers in times of disaster. One idea around that would be for Congress to create a program similar to the Paycheck Protection Program that we had in the wake of COVID, to keep people on payroll. Because what we saw in the wake of the flooding on a lot of farms was that farmers who were devastated by this flooding really, really needed to maintain their workforce in order to clean up from the flooding and to have any hope of, getting crops back in the ground for the remainder of the season. And without being able to have some way to keep those employees paid while those farms had lost a substantial portion of their income, folks were not able to do that. As Grace mentioned, H-2A workers were sent home. Lots of other folks were not able to continue out their season. And then, in addition, really wholesale shifting the resources in the Farm Bill that largely right now go to larger scale commodity crop producers, to better support small scale, food production that is actually really feeding people in our communities versus food production that is supporting the production of ethanol and just going to feed livestock in CAFOs, for example. Some of those major shifts are really what we're asking for.
Thanks, Maddie. I'll also say that if anyone here is really interested in getting involved in participatory work around the Farm Bill, we have space for you, and you should reach out. I see some other questions. Okay, we answered this Farm Bill question. Andy is asking, can we say more about the direct payments to farms? It sounds like this is a state level proposal. Is there anything like that in the Farm Bill? And for both state and federal, what are the legs in either realm? Well, I'm very excited to tell you that after we went on Maddie went on VPR on Monday, or a week ago, and talked about the fact that we wanted to champion this idea here in Vermont and that we wanted to see it happen. We did get a call from one of our senators' teams who wanted to meet and think about how we could bring it forward as a federal idea and what that would look like. Now, as we know, with the federal government, it's kind of a plant a seed that takes many years to take root and grow approach. So I do not think that we harbor any illusions that that would be like an immediate program that could be passed in this Farm Bill, but it is an idea that we would want to put out there as something that could take some time. We think that that is a possible strategy. We think that piloting it with a small group that is not via the state is probably what's most likely, like piloting it through philanthropic dollars and then showing that it is possible and bringing it as a state campaign. So what we're excited about is that we're seeing the strategy be pointed to from a variety of positions, from a food security stance, from a climate resilience stance, from a rural development stance. This idea is coming up over and over. That's always a good sign for viability of an idea. And we think that we could build a campaign around it, but there's a lot of questions that would need to be worked out. How does it exactly work? Does it benefit all farmers or only some kinds of farmers? Is there a scale issue? Like who administers it? Those are questions that we need time and funding to research well and then bring home to Vermont and put into a campaign, a very clear campaign that we can work on. We have a coalition of organizations who want to work on this together. And now we have to do some planful work to see if it's possible. But my sense is there's state supported strategies that are being pointed to that indicate to me if we could do a pilot well, let's see if we could have a campaign where those dollars are ultimately publicly funded. Anything you would add, Maddie, on that? Or do you think that's sufficient?
I think that covers it. But we're really excited about the concept, and trying to work more and more upstream is really a significant goal of ours here at NOFA. And that is probably one of the most upstream things that we could think of to do at the moment.
Yes. I see another question. Have you looked into getting grants from national organizations to build up our farmer resiliency fund, those resiliency grants? Yes. I think the short answer is yes. And we do have some funds, which are national funds, who are supporting, and we are deeply grateful, and we're always open to taking more. And those fund bodies, both the emergency fund and the resilience fund, the resilience grants fund, just pass that money back out. We do try. So yeah, essentially we get a little bit from national funds. Most of the funding comes from folks in philanthropy and grant making organizations here in Vermont, but not entirely. Anything you would add to that, Erin? Okay.
Maybe just if you have any ideas of places we should look, let us know and we'll reach out.
Yes. I'll just draw everyone's attention to Erin's comment in the chat, which breaks down the where we've given the 150 grants. We did an analysis at that point, so I don't have an updated, but here's a list of counties where people had given. Are we seeing more or fewer farms applying for organic certification after the flood? I'm not clear about that because of the way the organic certification cycle works. I don't know yet. Essentially, we have seen that there was a trend in organic certification where certification grew and grew and grew for many years. More and more farms were getting certified, and we have seen that level off. Here in Vermont, Andy Jones is on the Vermont Organic Farmers Review Committee and could also talk about that. But we want to continue to support people in getting organic certified, such that there is one of our organizational values is around integrity and trust. And while organic certification, we see it more as a floor, like we'd like all these practices to be adopted as widely as possible. We do think that it's important to have that integrity of verifying what's happening on farms. And at the same time, we know that organic certification is not for all the farms we serve for a variety of reasons. Not all farms need organic certification for their markets. And we want to work with all farms in moving towards increasingly organic practices, regardless of whether or not they're certified. And we do that on the nonprofit side through our practice adoption team. So we are welcoming to work with folks who are certified, folks who are not certified. What we want to see is the land being tended as well as possible, and for farmers to be able to get a premium in the marketplace for their excellent land tending that they're doing. So from the initial applications, do you have a sense of what the remaining gap was for farms on average? For the resilience grants, do you offer a menu of potential projects, not to limit projects to, but to provide potential examples and potential contractors to complete the work to cut down on reinventing the wheel? Interesting. We have not matched people for the resilience grants piece of this question. Generally, these are projects that the farmers themselves bring up and say that they want to do. And they range. Erin, do you want to share? I've been talking a lot. Do you want to share any of the cool examples of resilience grants that have come through?
Yeah, sure. So the resilience grants are pretty wide. Anything that will help promote resilience on a farm that centers around our mission: ecological sustainability, economic viability, and social justice. So, obviously we care about projects that mitigate against climate change. We care about projects that reduce and repair the harms in the food system from systemic racism. And we care about projects that are going to help people do better practices. So farms can apply for projects that integrate those or that focus on one aspect or another. Grace shared the example earlier of a farm that did a lot of water rerouting on their farm. So we've seen a lot of projects that have either helped farms kind of deal with too much water or not enough water. So we've helped with a lot of ponds. Also farms that have wanted to buy a generator because they were seeing longer and more frequent power outages with the changing climate and losing product when their freezers or storage units would go out. We've seen farms that have added accessibility to be more welcoming spaces to people with mobility challenges. We've seen farms that have done, trainings for their staff around social justice and how to better serve folks in their community. We've supported several food access initiatives. Last year, we had a really cool project down in Townsend, which is the nearest grocery store with fresh food is about 30 minutes away. And so a farm started a pay what you can farm stand, and that has been really well received. And it's just a great way for that community to access food and to make it more accessible for everyone in the community. So we see a really wide range of projects. Some farms have built farm stands. So you can read about all of the projects that we funded on our website if you want to learn more. And I think another piece around trying to not have people reinvent the wheel is that we try and match the really innovative projects that we're seeing with workshops that we host or farm visits. So we have, in the summer, we host socials on farms all around the state, and we try and host socials on farms that are doing really cool stuff so that people can go and see it and get inspired and learn how people are doing the cool projects that we're helping to fund. And the same with workshops. So we have 45 workshops at our winter conference upcoming, and we'll have several resilience grantee participants there. And the same for our summer workshops. So we held 9 summer workshops all around the state and tried to really feature some of those projects as well. So definitely trying to make sure that we're spreading the knowledge that people are generating through these projects, or just the cool practices to try and help them be established on other farms as well.
Thanks, Erin. And your other piece of this question, Adam, was from the initial applications, do we have a sense of what the remaining gap was for farms? We don't, because BGAP, the state made a $1 million pool available. VCF opened up a fund since our first round, but we're about to re-invite people to either apply for the first time, or Beth, to your question, with the end of the year approaching and a considerable amount of funding remaining, we considered increasing the remaining funds allowance or going back to our initial applicants? Yes, we plan to go back to the people who've already received $5,000 and give them more money if they need more money. We are going to have a simple second round form to fill out that answers your question, Adam, about, hey, how much is left? If you lost $200,000 and then you got $20,000 from BGAP and $5,000 from us and something from VCF, what is your whole still, so we can get a sense of how far we are off still. But certainly the overwhelming majority of people could absorb another $5,000 and not be made, be back to where they were before. So we do plan to open that up. And because what we would like to do is be able to give out as much as possible, and yes, retain some for that small pool, as I said, so that we're not totally empty for anything that might come up in 2024. But we don't intend to carry over hundreds of thousands of dollars into 2024. So yes, we will go back. We will also consider new applicants, Kristen. Yes. So new applicants could apply again. The application is still open. So we're still getting rolling applications that comes in every day. So yeah.
Can I just add something, Grace? I think maybe I think you said this a little bit earlier, but something that was important to note is that obviously farms who lost everything, were recovering over the summer, but they weren't replanting, and many of them weren't replanting. And so they were applying for the grants. There were many, many, many farms who, because of the nature of this season, worked harder than ever to keep up with the pest pressure and the mildew and all of the challenges with this incredibly wet season. And so taking the time during the season to apply for the grant was challenging. And so we're still seeing applications come in. And then also a pattern that we saw after Tropical Storm Irene was that livestock producers primarily applied in the fall because they were trying to figure out, they weren't able to get hay out all summer, or they had challenges with their feed. And now they're at the point where they're trying to put up their hay for the season, and they're not being able to find it, or they're having to ship it from further away. And so we anticipated, based on the pattern from Tropical Storm Irene, that we would see kind of a big second wave of grant applications in the fall, which we have. And so we didn't want to deplete our funds too early to not be able to allow for the folks in the fall. So now that we've seen what we think is kind of the peak, we're planning on kind of issuing an announcement to say hey, we're planning on drawing down the majority of this fund by the end of the year. If you haven't applied yet and you want to, please apply by a certain date. I don't know exactly what date that is yet, because Bill, the person who's coordinating that, is away in Alaska this week, but he'll be back and he's been working on the application. So that should go out very soon and will be due, I think, in the second or third week of December. And then And then we'll be able to, both anyone new that comes in or folks who still have a remaining loss that want to apply for more than $5,000 of funds, we'll be able to give them more. And basically we'll take that whole pool of funds that we have left, less that 100,000 that we're hoping to keep for future disasters. And we'll be able to spread it out amongst all of the folks who are applying for the first time and or coming back for a second request. But that's kind of the timing reason why we waited to set that deadline, because we have heard from so many farms that they just didn't have time to apply this summer or even early fall. They were just working as hard as they could. And then for the livestock reason too, folks are typically putting up their feed right now. So we're seeing more applications kind of on the livestock side at this point of the year.
Thanks, Erin. We also had a question here, if we can speak to any information about BIPOC-led farms who were impacted or who applied or were funded by the emergency grants. Good question. The emergency fund application does not ask about people's racial identities, and no farm has not been funded who has applied so far. So we haven't come to we don't know who has received the emergency funds. In the resilience grants pool, we do ask if people are BIPOC, if farmers and farm workers applying for the funds are BIPOC. And there is a rubric that is created newly and posted publicly as part of that process, which is all about sort of participatory design. It's designed by our farmer and farm worker review committee, who are at least half a BIPOC committee. And that rubric does give additional points for folks who have been marginalized historically and currently in our food and agricultural system. So the resilience grants, I can tell you with more clarity, the answer to that. Erin can tell you.
21 out of the 62 grants we awarded this year were for BIPOC projects, BIPOC-led projects. And then if we look at both BIPOC, LGBTQ, and disabled farmer-led projects, that was 33 of the 62 projects, so more than half of the projects that we funded this year.
Does anyone else have a question? I see we have no open questions. Okay. Well, thank you all so much. It is our goal and intention and all the work that we do to be as transparent as possible. If there's anything that you are continuing to wonder about, or you want more information, or you want to just know more, please don't hesitate to reach out and continue to be involved with us. We are really excited to have had this time to be together with you and share, and so grateful for this community and stepping up in this huge way this year. It really would not have been possible without all of you coming together. So thank you, and thanks to the people who couldn't be here and registered to get a copy of this. We're grateful to you too. And if you all have questions that you didn't get to raise, please do email them to smgrace@NOFA-VT.org. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.